Good afternoon. Welcome to Law Power Hour. Today, with the election right around the corner, I thought it'd be a good idea to have an expert in the field of election laws and campaigning and campaign financing with us today. So I invited Mr. Michael Henry. He wants me to call him Mike, but I'll call him Michael Henry when I introduce him. And he's an expert in this field. He's worked throughout the United States. He's worked in Africa. And it's really exciting to have you today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Come on a little closer to the
Sure.
microphone.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Henry, would you tell us a little bit about your background in this field?
Yes. So to start, I actually haven't worked in Africa, but I do study a lot about the South African system as well as our system here in America. My background is that I was born in Flint, Michigan. I lived in Detroit and New Orleans, attended public schools all my life, and later went to the University of Michigan and have been involved in politics all my life. My grandmother took me to the polls as a little boy as she voted and as she got involved. Three of my grandparents were UAW members, members of unions. My mother and I are currently members of the UAW. I'm in the National Writers Union, which is UAW affiliate. And I do strategic business planning and consulting, and I raise capital for small businesses. But my fun time, the time that I do to volunteer, is I help to train candidates to run for office, regular everyday citizens. It's called the Train to Win Camp. I am also the chairman of the Ann Arbor Democratic Party and an officer at large with the Michigan Democratic Party. And the two most interesting things that I've done lately is I helped to co-found a clinic, a law clinic with Judge Deborah Thomas. She's a Wayne County Circuit Court judge, and it's the Citizens Education Law Clinic. And most recently, Social Justice Matters is a project that we are developing to help people, regular everyday citizens. They'll be able to rate their judges, their courts, and their police agencies.
Now, Judge Thomas, by the way, has been on my show, and she's a strong advocate of expungement.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
So I don't know if any of your work crosses over with her in the expungement area, but it's also one of the things that we strongly believe in this station is giving the rights of individuals who've been convicted of crimes the right to get a new start in life. So we appreciate your efforts.
And we appreciate everybody that does that. And it's important to know that when someone has paid their debt to society, we need to figure out a way to reintegrate them into society. We need to make sure they can become taxpayers, they can find jobs, find housing, and become educated and trained. And so the work that you've done, that Judge Thomas is doing, that Judge Frank Szymanski is doing, all around the idea of restorative justice is really important work for us to be a whole society again.
I'm going to be quite honest. The members of my firm are the ones who are really responsible for this. Just this week, we had two individuals call who wanted expungement packages, and we send them out to them, and my hat's off to the people in my firm.
That's good work.
Now, I want to know a little bit about the election that's coming up and what role you're going to play in the election as far as monitoring the activities of the election.
Sure. So one of the things that I do, one of the roles that I also serve in that I failed to mention, I'm on the Board of Canvassers for Washtenaw County. And the Board of Canvassers in each county, they certify elections. I think many of your viewers will know or will remember in Florida when we had the Board of Canvassers trying to certify the election between Gore and Bush. And we had all the hanging Chad controversy and that kind of thing. There's a 4-panel board in Washtenaw County that I serve on, and so we have to make sure that the integrity of the election is proper. So that is one of the things that I will do immediately after the election, the very next day, to make sure that any complaints, any issues related to voter access are addressed. And we take lots of care to make sure that the election actually has integrity. Leading up to the election, my role in the Democratic Party affords me the opportunity to be engaged with candidates as well as with voters, to register people in advance to vote, and to also make sure that people are able to get absentee ballots. Folks that aren't able to get to the polls easily, who may be senior citizens or who maybe have maybe they have health issues, maybe they plan to be out of town, or they have some other reason for not being able to vote on election day. We want them to be able to get an absentee ballot and vote in advance. Vote while they're sitting at their kitchen table with their ballot, and they can actually learn about the candidates and the issues and all the proposals that are on the ballot. So those are some of the things that I'm involved in. And again, I am a little bit partial to the Democratic side, but there are a number of nonpartisan elections that people need to be aware of.
Let's talk about that in a minute here,
Sure.
because Mr. Brewer was on our show.
Okay.
And if you recall, those of you who watch the show regularly, Mark Brewer was the attorney who took up the issue on straight ticket voting.
Yes.
But he also reminded you that there's a nonpartisan side to the ballot that you can't forget when you're voting.
That's right.
You can't skip over it. So let's give a little education in advance of the election to all of our viewers exactly what you're talking about.
Sure. And Mark Brewer is a good man. He's done a lot of good work around straight ticket voting. A number of our citizens depend on the label of Democratic Party, Republican Party, Green Party, Libertarian, and it's a very good indicator of where someone's values lie. So I'm glad that Mark took that on and had a lot of good support to make sure that people were informed at the ballot box. The nonpartisan portion of the ballot is where all of our school board candidates, our community college trustee candidates, our judicial candidates, and Supreme Court justice, well, the Supreme Court justice candidates are nominated by the Democratic and Republican Party, but they are still on the nonpartisan part of the ballot. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for people. So if you do vote straight ticket, you have not voted for anyone in school board, community college trustee, or your judges or your Supreme Court justices, and it is very important. Nor have you voted for any of the proposals that are on the ballot in your community. So it is very important to do that piece of it. And in fact, we like to tell people vote the nonpartisan portion of the ballot first, and then go and vote the partisan section.
Now, it's really important to understand why you need to vote the nonpartisan part of the ballot, because these are the people, when I'm referring about the judiciary, that we deal with on a hands-on basis with your problems.
That's right.
Day by day and week by week and month by month for their term, whether it's for 4 years or 6 years.
That's right.
We have to deal with these problems. So you have to go out and vote, or if you're voting absentee, you must get engaged in this process.
That's right. And you bring up a good point. And the unfortunate reality is that most citizens, most voters, most residents in all of our communities are more likely to come in contact with a judge as opposed to a president or a senator or a congressperson or a state representative. It's the judges day to day that deal with friend of the court issues, traffic violations, issues related to custody, issues related to property disputes. So, or probate issues and estate planning. So these judges really have a profound impact on our lives, and they really should be the people that reflect our values. And so when we don't vote for those folks, or when we forget about that portion of the ballot, and there is a huge problem in voting that's called a down ballot drop-off. So people vote, for the thing that they know about. They know about Hillary Clinton, versus Donald Trump. They know about our senators and our congresspeople and our state reps or our city council people, but they don't really study the judicial candidates. And it's so critically important to the way we live our lives day to day and the values that are reflected through those candidates.
And if you don't know anything about the judiciary, you can get that information if you have online access, or by going to the library, or having a friend or a relative who has online access. They can research each candidate. And the most important thing I tell clients when they come to the office is look for candidates who are going to give even-handed treatment.
That's right.
In other words, they're not going to favor business over little folks. They're not going to favor, as I call it, eagles over sparrows. Everybody's going to be treated the same regardless of race, creed, or color when they come before the judge. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be very straightforward with you. In some of our local areas, it's impossible to get even-handed treatment. See, if you can look for candidates who've practiced law, and now they're running for the judiciary, who have a reputation for even-handed treatment, that'll give you a better indicator of what it's all about in terms of appearances in the courtroom. Because individuals who go to court who are not represented are not treated the same as individuals who are represented by judges who do not believe in even-handed treatment, because the judges who don't believe in even-handed treatment have prejudices.
That's right.
And they have no patience, and they shouldn't be sitting on the bench.
That's correct.
And I'm real serious about this, because there have been many times when I've been in court with a client, I've wanted to go up and speak my piece on behalf of someone that I don't represent, but I'm not allowed to.
That's right.
So these issues are very important, and that's part of your job, isn't it, to make sure that people get out and they understand who's running for office.
That's right. And people can also go to any of the coordinated campaign offices. There's one on Livernois between 7 Mile and Curtis, where you can get information on judicial candidates at that campaign office. They're all over the state, and so if you do have viewers that want information, it is available. And I love the forceful way that you talk about these judges that maybe aren't fair. And there are a number of judges who were in private practice beforehand, and oftentimes they've worked for some large corporation or some insurance company, some entity that isn't necessarily the friend of the little guy and the little gal. And those are not the judges that we really want on the bench. We want people that live in neighborhoods where they also are connected to other citizens that may be going through similar challenges, and who are sympathetic, empathetic to the problems that people have in their daily lives and need resolution to them. We don't want someone who has their head in the clouds and is only focused on the big business or the insurance company.
Okay. Here's a businessman talking to you. He's in the capital business. That means that his company has money and they invested in businesses. So he's wearing two hats here. And he's trying to tell you in a nice way that you have to look at the background. This is what you're trying to tell everybody. And I'm not saying this to insult your intelligence, but I want you to hear this loud and clear. If you see somebody who's been appointed to the bench, you better find out about their background.
That's right.
Because you don't want to vote for that person just because they're an incumbent based upon name recognition.
That's correct.
You don't want to vote for Judge Smith because you've heard Judge Smith's name so often that you want to vote for him.
That's right.
Find out about this judge. If this judge has worked for a large insurance company, or if this judge was a prosecutor, and you've got to appear in front of that judge, you're going to need somebody who understands how to neutralize his or her bias. Isn't that true?
That's correct. And if I may, I can quickly talk about some of the biases on the court with certain judges, if you allow me.
Why don't we do this? We're going to take a break for a minute, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
Okay, now you're going to talk about bias and prejudices that exist in public office.
Yes.
And I use public office because I just don't want to pick on judges.
Well, if I may, I'll talk about the judges first, and
Okay.
then we'll go down the list.
Okay, and please, if you've got any questions and you think that a judge or a public official needs to be monitored, here's the guy right here. I'm holding up his hand. Here's the guy who represents the group that will help you monitor that judge or that public official to see if you're getting even-handed treatment. Sorry for grabbing onto you.
It's okay. You made me feel like Muhammad Ali there. That was great.
Well, but you're the champion of underprivileged people who are being taken advantage of. Now talk about it.
So
Hold
I-
on, we got a question here already.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have a question.
Okay, we've got to get the
I
volume
just
up here.
I heard you said, call if you need to ask some questions about things. I'm calling my daughter that got killed in June. This June, past June. I have a grandson that's 7. Her mama went and found temporary custody. We went to a couple of court days. The final one is the end of this month. But Judge, she won't let no one have overnight, keep my grandson overnight. Now, I'm his biological grandfather, and I was married to my daughter's mom. It seems like they bias against guys down there in family court down there, because I get to see him every other Saturday, but no overnight. But I'm trying to figure out, why does she have all the rights when she's a grandparent just like I? And it don't make sense down there. I don't know if y'all want me to say the judge's name or not.
No, don't do that. But here's what you're faced with. We don't have all the facts. So without bearing your soul on TV, I want to be fair with you. The judge is going to look at all of the factors on both sides to see what the relationship and the contacts have been and how involved you've been in that child's life. And they're going to weigh those factors. So what I always tell individuals is that you can come back to court and you can revisit these issues. And the best way of handling this is take the gift that you have, the opportunity to spend time with your grandchild. And if it's not overnight, it will develop into that relationship as the court sees that it's a nice, smooth transition.
Yeah, but my thing is, how do the judge know why they don't bring my grandson is 7 down there and talk to him? No one brought him down. They listening to my ex-wife, which she's alive. Her household is not being ran right. My household, I'm married, been with my wife 10 years. We, been working. No one came and checked out. Now, they sent an attorney over there, and they haven't sent nobody over there. And I've been to every court case since we've been there. And I think it's a bias against a man that wants to spend time with his grandson. And I understand take the time, but that was my daughter. And me and my daughter was close. And that's my grandson. And I don't think it's fair how the court treats you, while a man, when it's either a friend of the court or either a child involved. They always say the man needs to be involved. When we try to get involved, then they put us, they limit us from doing that. My grandson be a man there to take him to baseball games, basketball games, and so on.
Oh, okay.
And it's sad that we have to get the short end of the stick when you're trying to do what's right, instead of them coming into my household and see how I'm living. Because she still got grudge against me because we divorced back in '98.
I'm trying to help you here. Okay? You're expressing your frustration, and I'm trying to teach you how to deal with it. I'm trying to give you some good advice. Your frustration isn't going to help you. What's going to help you is you've stepped up and you want to be involved in this child's life. Start getting involved in this child's life, and then come back to court in 3 or 4 months and ask the court for overnight. Make it a comfortable transition. Otherwise, it's all about what you and your ex-wife, the one that you divorced several years ago, that's your history. That's not this child's history. Y'all ought to forget about that and just deal with the child's needs, not your needs. Thanks for calling.
You know, and I will say that I hear that story often where men feel like the court system is imbalanced, and I believe there's some evidence to that, and I sympathize with your caller, and I think that the other thing that you've probably advised your clients, and it sounded like that's what you were doing, saying, you know, come back, you know, some months down the road, but the other key part of it is having character witnesses or some kind of testimony that speaks to his involvement with the child and how he treats the child and, you know, how he cares for the child.
Well, what happens quite often in these situations, and we're going to get back into this bias issue,
Sure.
what happens in these situations is that grandparents who've been disenfranchised from their grandchildren because of custody issues, they really are polarized. They haven't had enough of an opportunity to be engaged in their lives.
Sure.
So one of the parents isn't there, or God forbid somebody dies, and the grandparents want to step up and be involved. They want that child to be part of their family and part of their community.
Sure.
But in order to do that, you got to walk before you run.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very slow process. And you have to build trust. And sometimes, until the courts have an opportunity to look at the full picture, nothing can be done. But when they see it's adversarial between the grandparents, and the grandparents are fighting about this child, and they're not really concerned about the needs of the child, then the court is not going to give in. So sometimes it appears to be bias, it may not be. Now let's talk about this bias issue a little bit.
Sure. Well, let's start with the Supreme Court. We have a Supreme Court now made up of 7 individuals. 5 are on the Republican side, 2 on the Democratic side. And I think many of your viewers will probably be uncomfortable when they hear some of the background of some of the Republican side justices.
We're getting into the caller.
Sure.
Hold on for a
Okay,
second.
Sure.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
We're well, thank you.
Oh, I had a question that I had wanted to ask, but it doesn't have to do with what you are speaking on.
Okay,
I
well,
had a contractor build my porch top. He built it out of a rubber roof. It's a rubber rooftop, so I cannot sit on it. I've had it now for 2 years. I didn't realize it until this year when I put a table and chair set up there. And it sunk, punched a couple of holes and indentations. No leaking going on, but his idea was to put some heavy-duty carpet under it. And also maybe something under the feet of the table, which were really pointed, kind of pointed. But the chairs have feet under them, but they're oval. So if you sit down, you're going to still sink.
well,
but
this has been going on for a couple of years, hasn't
no
it?
real solution. He thought he was going to get another contract to do some more work on my house. And I am so upset because I got a $6,000 rubber roof that I can't even use.
Okay, let me ask you a question. This is real important for the listeners. Did you hire a licensed contractor?
Uh-oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Did you hire a licensed contractor?
Yes.
Then you report it to the Department of Licensing and Regulation
Ah,
for the state of Michigan, and you're entitled to have a hearing.
okay.
Did you receive a warranty when the work was done?
You said,
In other-
I got you coming through the TV at the same time, so I'm muting it. Okay.
Did
Now,
you receive a written warranty for the work?
a written warranty for the work?
Yes, you have a written contract, right?
Yes, I do.
And in that contract, it says that if you have a problem, you have 1 year, and you have 5 years for the materials.
Probably do have 5 years.
Okay, if it's 5 years, then you still have a right to pursue a claim against the contractor.
Okay.
And how much money did you spend for this work?
$5,888.
Well, you're right around the small claims limit of $5,000. So you can go to the small claims court and you can file a claim there, say that the work was not being performed in a reasonable manner, and bring in the new contractor to court as your witness to explain what was done wrong and what it's going to cost to repair it.
All right.
Also, file a complaint with the Department of Licensing and Regulation in Lansing, and you're entitled to a full hearing.
Okay, let me write that down.
The Department of Licensing and Regulation
One
in
moment,
Lansing, and they have a building section, and you can file a written complaint, and you're entitled to have a full and fair hearing. Okay?
Okay. Department of
Licensing and Regulation.
Licensing and Regulation.
Okay. If you want to know how to get a hold of them, you can call me tomorrow morning at 1-800-LAW, L-A-W, USA 1, and I will direct you to where you
Okay.
should go and how you should handle it.
1-800-WAL, W-A-L, USA
No,
1.
1-800-LAW, L-A-W,
Oh,
USA 1. That's law, L-A-W, USA 1. And I will give you the direct
Hello?
approach, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, have a good evening.
That's great. You're giving out all this free legal advice.
Okay, well, let's get back to the bias and prejudice here.
Okay, sure.
But this is what we're here for. We're here to help people.
It's great. I thank you for doing that for our community. So a couple of the five Republicans, 2 Democrats on the Michigan Supreme Court. 2 of them are up for election right now. They're called incumbents, but one was just appointed last September. She was appointed. She's a Snyder appointee. Rick Snyder appointed her. And we know what Snyder appointees have done to our state, have done to Flint, have done to the Detroit Public Schools. She was also a member of George W. Bush's Justice Department when they legalized torture, legalized waterboarding. They made it legal to torture people. She's not from Michigan. She doesn't really understand our culture and our people here. And she's on Donald Trump's short list for U.S. Supreme Court. Judge Deborah Thomas is running against her, and I think we need to stop someone with those values and put someone on the court like Judge Deborah Thomas, who focuses on restorative justice and those kinds of values. Another Snyder appointee, David Viviano, has been on the court for many years. He was appointed by Snyder initially, and once again, extremely friendly to insurance companies and big business. And Judge Frank Szymanski is running against him. And I really think Judge Szymanski's values around children and juvenile restorative justice, similar to what Judge Deborah Thomas does, is more in line with the values of people in Michigan, the citizens and the voters of Michigan, than the other 2 candidates.
Right. You know, as a lawyer, I'm not supposed to speak on these issues.
I know.
So I won't speak on these issues other than to tell you I've had the pleasure of having Deborah Thomas on my show. And I've had the privilege of appearing in front of Judge Szymanski. And I find both of them to be worthy. I've had the benefit of reading Judge Viviano's decisions. And I disagree with many of his decisions. And they have not served our citizens, unfortunately, when he was on the Court of Appeals, the way that I believe they should have. It's not an attack on him, it's just a personal opinion.
Well, that's well said, and I'm fortunate that I'm not bound by the same rules, but I think he's been bad for the courts, and he's been bad for our state.
Now, this other individual who's an interloper, I don't know her, but I know if she was appointed and she was involved in waterboarding, that she's probably going to try and bring back some form of capital punishment of this state, and it's the last thing we need.
It is, and we have a number of issues in our legal system that we need addressed, and we need even-handed, good temperamented judges that understand our population and understand how to make it work together, how to make it heal, and that's what restorative justice is about. It's not just about punitive measures, and it's not just about locking people up and throwing away the key. And on one side, you're going to have people like that, and people who won't understand what everyday citizens are going through. And on the other side, the good side, not the dark side, but the Jedi side, to bring in Star Wars metaphors, we have Judge Deborah Thomas and Judge Frank Szymanski.
What he's trying to say in a nice way is they don't understand what the struggle is, and some people have to sleep under the overpasses with cardboard while other people sleep in nice condominiums. And if you understand the struggle, then you're not empathetic, but you're understanding of why sometimes folks get in trouble.
That's right.
We're going to take a break for a minute.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
Okay, let's talk some more about this bias and prejudice issue without implicating a particular individual, but give us your reflection of bias and prejudice.
Sure. So there are some judges who automatically take the word of law enforcement officials. And I don't mean this as a criticism of all law enforcement, but we know there's a small percentage of law enforcement individuals that try to game the system, try to manipulate the system, try to lock people up just because they believe them to be bad. But they have a high burden to present evidence to prosecutors, and prosecutors have the burden of proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that someone is guilty. Oftentimes we have judges who come from the prosecutor ranks who are biased and who automatically take the word of officers. I can give you one example where the Detroit
Hold on, we have a question here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I have a question regarding Social Security. Is it possible to sue them in small claims court?
To sue who? Social Security?
Yes.
You can't sue Social Security Small Claim Court because the Social Security system is set up through the federal government. If you have an issue with Social Security, you have to file an application for benefits, and then you can go, if you're denied, to a hearing.
Well, I wasn't denied. I received Social Security, and after about a year, landlord went into the office and told them that I wasn't paying rent, and they cut my Social Security in half on that alone. No hearing or anything.
No, they're not allowed to do that because Social Security is exempt. Social Security is exempt. You can call,
What can I do?
ask questions, 1-800-LAW-USA-1. Call me tomorrow before 10 o'clock, and I'll answer your question.
Okay, 1-800-LAW-USA.
USA-1. Yeah, and I'll answer your question in the morning. Normally I don't give the number out, but you're really asking some specific questions today that I know the answers to, but we're really involved in an important conversation about bias and prejudice on the air. And listen in, because it's real important. But call me in the morning, okay?
1-800-USA-LAW-1.
No, 1-800-LAW-USA-1.
Oh, 1-800-LAW-USA-1. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's get back to this bias and prejudice. You were talking about law enforcement, where prosecutors now are on the bench, and they have a tendency to listen to law enforcement.
Yes. And this is important because sometimes you have those rare individuals in law enforcement who game the system, who aren't being straightforward. And the Detroit Police Department was under a decree, a federal decree, where they were found to have numerous problems handling evidence, numerous problems with chain of custody, and there were a small number of judges who would say, hey, wait a minute, I need to make sure that this evidence has integrity, that this process has been handled, that maybe you didn't slip something into the evidence room to implicate this particular person that's on trial. And Judge Thomas was one of those people. And judges who don't move cases along really quickly because they want people to get justice oftentimes are penalized by their chief judges and also by the Michigan Supreme Court. The Michigan Supreme Court handles all of the administrative rules and kind of the culture that gets created in our judicial system. So if your Supreme Court is biased towards efficiency and biased towards making sure that you move cases along quickly, regardless of whether or not you're concerned about a police department that has been under decree and has been found to not handle evidence properly and maybe to do some things that weren't necessarily legal or proper, then you need judges that are willing to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's slow this process down and make sure that there's integrity in this process, because that is our last hope for justice is in our courts. And if we don't have courts that have integrity, if we don't have judges that are going to fight to make sure that a process has integrity, then we'll just be a vigilante land. People will stop having faith in the courts.
So let me translate it a little differently. He said it so eloquently, but I'll make it real simple. If you're innocent, you're entitled to have a trial. You're entitled to have a thorough investigation of your case. You're entitled, if you're innocent and you're indigent, to have the court appoint an investigator to assist with the investigation of your case. Back in August, we had the Innocence Project folks on here with Mr. Proctor. And if you recall, we had a gentleman who was in prison for over 10 years because they said that he raped and killed a woman. And he didn't commit the crime. They found out through DNA that he didn't do it. So you got to stand up for your rights. If you don't stand up for your rights, then you're not going to be protected.
That's right. And you need judges who won't just assume that all prosecutors and all police officers are telling the truth. There have been a number of instances where prosecutors were found to be misleading the court. And they don't really have any recourse. You don't have any recourse after a prosecutor lies about you and winds up this whole case that is designed to put you behind bars. And so you need judges that are going to be empathetic and sympathetic and are going to ask questions themselves. Judges can ask questions in addition to opposing counsel. And they can do that to make sure that the whole process is fair and is clear, and that nobody is winding up some kind of manipulative story to bias the case. And you need judges that are not biased.
I want to tell you a quick story about that. I was in court representing a man who'd been charged with domestic violence third offense. Mm-hmm. And he categorically denied it. Mm-hmm. So I was ready to go to hearing with him. But then I watched the same judge who has a reputation for putting individuals in prison have a hearing for a man who'd been before him 3 times on domestic violence, and he dismissed the charges each time. So he called the woman in who had charged this man with domestic violence and the first incident and the second incident and the third incident, and he called her before the court and he said, look, if you come back here and put this man through this again, I'm going to put you in jail. Mm. So then I went to my client and said, look, we've got to work this out. If you committed the crime, then we've got to work something out that makes sense, because I see that he has an open mind. And if you're guilty, he's going to put you away. And if you're innocent, he's going to let you walk. So we worked it out. Hmm. That's what you want to see, even-handed treatment.
That's right. That's great. I'm glad you have stories like that. I've never, experienced that. I have experienced stories from people like Judge Thomas and Frank Szymanski, and they talk about the very real feelings that families have when they come into a courtroom, and the stress and the pain and suffering that they see from people in their courts. And when you have a judge that makes that part of their story and part of their analysis, you know that you're dealing with somebody who cares about the community and cares about the individuals in front of them, and they don't just look at them as another file that they have to push on, you know, into the file cabinet and close out a case. And that's important, because the courts can also be used to heal our communities and not just punish people. Some people are bad, and some people do need to be separated from the rest of society, and some people just need mental health treatment. Some of our veterans come back from war, they fight on our behalf, and they do some very horrible things on our behalf, and they have post-traumatic stress, they have brain injuries, and they come back to civilian populations and they get into trouble. Maybe they, you know, get into an altercation or they do something, and we underfund mental health, the mental health care for them. We underfund our VA hospitals, and Judge Thomas was responsible for pushing the largest veterans treatment court in our state at Wayne County Circuit Court, and it helps veterans to heal and get mental health treatment. So instead of sentencing them to prison for getting into a fight numerous times, she'll recognize, and other judges who are working on the veterans treatment court docket, they'll recognize that maybe this person needs some mental health treatment. Maybe they need a psychiatrist or some talk therapy to help them to deal with this, to be productive members of our society again. And they've clearly proven that they can be. They've fought a war for us, and they come back and then are bruised and damaged, and then we don't do our part to help take care of them.
For those of you who are veterans, if you get into trouble, there is a special court. And if you have medical problems related to the time that you were serving our country, then you can avail yourself of those services. You can get assistance at the court to make sure that you end up in the correct court. It's very, very important to understand that. And for those of you who do not have veterans experience, if you have mental illness, from the very first day that you appear in court, someone should be advocating on behalf of your problem.
That's right.
And you, and I say your problem. They're going to be talking about you globally, not you as the perpetrator of a crime, but globally, so there's a better understanding of why you're there. Because oftentimes you may not understand everything that's going on and you need special treatment.
That's right.
We're going to take a break for a minute. We'll be right back.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
We've talked a little bit about bias. We've talked a little bit about prejudice. Are there services that your organizations that you're involved in offer to watch what's going on in court to assist people to make sure there's even-handed treatment?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that question. So the first is the Citizen Education Law Clinic.
Okay. How do we get a hold of you?
Yes, you can go online to citizenlawclinic.org, citizenlawclinic.org, and .org. There are a number of different topic areas, and if you want a judge or an attorney to come out and speak to your community group, to a school, to your fraternity or sorority, your neighborhood watch group, this is all free of charge, and these attorneys and judges love to come out and speak anywhere in the state of Michigan. Judge Thomas drives up to Marquette. She drives to Muskegon and Benton Harbor and Kalamazoo, all over the place when she's not on the bench. And so most of these opportunities to hear judges and attorneys speak will be in the evenings when they're not working or on the weekends. So that's one resource, and you can have someone speak on indigent defense, as well as expungement, as well as how to combat human trafficking in your community, veterans treatment courts, as well as substance abuse treatment court. There are a long list of topics that you can go to the website and see that these folks will speak on.
So if a church wants you to come speak there, they can contact your organization.
That's correct.
If a senior citizen complex wants a speaker, you'll help them get a speaker.
That's right.
If there's a club at your church where there's youth involved in the club, we put a program on back in June, and we dealt with issues like DWB,
Yes,
important issues, driving while black.
that's right. And we have a star attorney named Robin McCoy who speaks on what to do when stopped by the police, how to handle police contact. Judge Thomas speaks on that as well. And they really give you solid tools to understand what an officer might be thinking, what the system is doing to make sure that this whole interaction goes right, and your responsibility to make sure that you get home safely to your family.
Okay, so share that information again, how we find you.
citizenlawclinic.org, citizenlawclinic.org. That's one, and I can share another one with you if you
That
like.
would be helpful, because I want those of you who are out there, if you've got a community group, it's very important to get engaged.
That's right. All free of charge. The second group is Social Justice Matters, socialjusticematters.com. And this is an organization that is designed to help the general public rate. You can grade the judges, the courts, and the police agencies that serve us, because all of these entities work for us, work for the people, and we need to be able to analyze and also rate their performance. In any job that I've had, I've always been reviewed, and I've always had some kind of review from a manager or some kind of higher level person above me. And the people are at the top of the system of government. It's the people that should be doing the grading and the rating of our judges and our police agencies and our court system.
Would your organization go out to the burbs and observe some of these courts where people of color aren't treated the same as
Indeed.
other individuals?
Indeed, and that's the purpose. That is the purpose, is to say, where are we having problems with equity, with poor treatment, with bias? So right now we're in the early stages, and we're going to collect a lot of data. And once you collect data, the thing about data that I've learned, being associated with research environments, is that the data will make it very clear, and it won't be somebody's opinion. There'll be evidence of bias and evidence of improper treatment or environments that are not fair.
So the idea is not to complain about it after it happens, but to contact these organizations while it's going on and get them engaged.
That's right. And we all have to do our part. And I'm glad you said it that way, because we're trying to create the tools to help all of the people in our state to have better lives and to live, in a fair and just society. But each of us as citizens has a responsibility to contribute to that effort.
See, one of the purposes of this show is to bring you information so that you don't have to deal with the problem after it's occurred, but you can deal with the problem before it occurs, be prepared for it, or while it's going on. And that's why your organizations are so important. Now what are you going to do on Election Day? Tell us about that.
Well, Election Day is always a lot of work for me. I'm not always certain which city I'll be in. If there's a problem with voter intimidation or voter suppression, many of us are oftentimes called to go and help with that problem. I have relationships with a number of the city clerks as well as county clerks, so that they can hear and see a familiar face when there are problems and maybe help to resolve some of them. I also make sure that teams are out passing out literature and making sure that people are informed as to what's going on. And we indeed also help people get to the polls. We have a huge van ride system where if there's someone who didn't get set up with an absentee ballot, or if there's someone who doesn't have their own transportation, who normally depends on public transit, we try to get them to the polls so that they don't have an undue burden placed on them because they want to vote.
How do I get to the polls if I don't have transportation? Where should I call?
You'll be able to call. You can actually look online first at vote411.org, but you can also go to, at least on the Democratic Party side, so I'm going to be a little partisan here, michigandems.com, and we have ride to the polls information where you can just call a simple phone number and someone will come out to pick you up.
Suppose I don't have internet.
I'm glad you said that because there is a digital divide. What I will do is I will make sure that I pull the phone number up so that people will be able to call. Do we have another segment or no?
No, you can pull up the number while we're
Okay,
here,
great.
and people will know where to call. So if you want to get out to vote, he's going to pull it up right now because it's real important. While he's pulling it up, I'll tell you, I remember as a child, my mother used to have the poll at our house. And it was in the garage, and the polling booths were set up there. And everything was done on paper.
Wow.
And I remember getting up in the middle of the night, and it'd still be there counting votes. So we've come a long way. So now we've got a way to vote, a right to vote, opportunity to vote, and hopefully he's going to have a number here for us in a minute.
Yep, sorry, my internet is slow here.
I want you to be able to get out and vote if you can't vote. You got that number?
And it's coming up right now.
Okay, share that number.
Well, I have to get it for your area here. I'm sorry. Hold on. That's the part of the problem is that we have numbers for different areas all over the state. So, and I also say that this is where a lot of the churches that we partner with come in handy because they have church buses that we work with to also help get people to the polls. I'm not getting one for this zip code, but I do know there are a number of churches that are engaged in helping with this process. Fellowship Chapel is one of them, and I'm going to find their number.
Okay, if you can't get to the polls and you want to vote, don't sit home. Let's get out and vote. I'm going to take a call in the meantime.
Great.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm not surprised at all that we can't find the Detroit number. That's part of our conspiracy to keep us away from the polls.
Pardon me? You had a question.
I'm not surprised you can't find a Detroit number.
Okay,
They want to do everything to keep us from the polls.
to keep you away from the polls.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's the point here. We don't want you kept away from the polls. We want you not to be disenfranchised. We want you to get out and vote.
Here's the number right here, 313.
That's why the number should be up on the screen.
Sure, and I apologize that I wasn't prepared for this particular question. I should have been. And I live in Washtenaw County, so most of my information is Washtenaw County information.
Okay, let's let him give the number.
Here's the number for Detroit, 313-347-2820. You can
And
call.
next week, I'll have the number on the screen for you. So those of you who need the number, I'll get them to post it during the show. Just like as a reminder, thank you, sir. This coming Saturday down at the library, the friend of the court promised to assist you with your problems between 1 and 4 at the main library. So those of you who feel that you haven't been treated fairly by the friend of the court, you ought to get down there because it's an arrest-free zone. You can't get arrested there. You can only get help. And if you don't go there for the help, that's your problem.
And there's one other point I want to make about access to voting. The clerk's office in Detroit has agreed to be open at the Wayne County Community College District campuses. they are working with the community college district to be open for voting in advance of the election, so that you don't have to stand in really long lines. You can go in advance on the weekends to the Wayne County Community College District to vote early.
So those of you who want to vote, this is a real important election. Don't forget to get out and vote. And remember, do a little research or get some information, because it's going to make a difference in how all of us are affected by this election. I have a quick question to ask you.
Yes.
On election day, if we have a problem and we're out voting and we recognize that there's a problem at the polls, what can we do about it?
You can call the Michigan Democratic Party office, and you can also call the clerk's office, the Detroit City Clerk, or the Wayne County Clerk here in Wayne County. I have a number of phone numbers for Washtenaw County, but your viewers are here in Wayne County, so and I apologize I don't have all those numbers handy, but you can call the Wayne County Clerk, the Detroit Clerk, or the Michigan Democratic Party.
And next week we'll have a list of all the numbers for you, I promise you, so that with the election around the corner, we don't want any of you stumped when you get out to vote. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.